solutions for the real world. Let me also introduce, very honored to also introduce our guest speaker, Boris Evelson. Boris is a VP and principal analyst with Forrester Research, and he's someone who delivers strategic guidance for large enterprises on IDB strategies, governance, and architecture. And he has been doing business with data and related, or rather, at least involved in businesses with data and related technologies for a long time. And Boris, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Pleasure.
So,
Thank you for having me.
yep, thank you. And I'm going to just jump right into the Q&A. I'll start with you, Boris. You have been an expert in AI-infused analytics. Why don't you set the ground for us and talk about, what is AI-infused analytics? How is it different from regular analytics? And indeed, why is it important?
Absolutely. Great topic. As you introduced me, I think everyone is beginning to realize that this is my favorite topic. It's not something that I do for a living, but I'm also very personally passionate about this. So as you said, I've been in this business for over 40 years, and while there have been a lot of improvements in the adoption and usage of analytics, we're still seeing a lot of barriers. A lot of different barriers. The one that I'm going to bring up today is 20% adoption, meaning no more than 20% of enterprise decision makers who could and should be using business intelligence and analytical applications hands-on are doing so. About 20 plus years ago, when graphical user interface, point and click, drag and drop was introduced, we thought that that was going to be panacea. That, why wouldn't every business user with little to no training use these intuitive systems? And absolutely, we went from completely IT-centric, IT-focused environment to a business user-focused environment. So we went from 0 to 20% penetration. But that's where it stopped. So now with AI-infused business intelligence analytical applications, I am hoping that 20% barrier is going to be breached. How is it going to be breached? I typically think about three very important dimensions. Dimension number one is deeper insights. Typically, even some of the modern business intelligence and analytical enterprise applications empower business users out of the box to with the descriptive and diagnostic analytics. How many widgets did I sell yesterday, and why did I sell more widgets yesterday than the day before? But for anything advanced, and when we say advanced analytics, we don't just mean predictive. Typically, people think about advanced analytics as synonymous to predictive. Predictive is forecasting. What is the likelihood of something happening is one of the capabilities of advanced analytics, but it's not the only one. Detecting anomalies, identifying trends, identifying trend reversals, very importantly, identifying key influencers on a metric. The fact that I sold fewer widgets yesterday than the day before, what other data point was the key influencer on that metric? And up until recently, business users 100% dependent on their data science professionals to infuse these kinds of deep, advanced machine learning algorithm to do all of the above, to do forecasting, to do trend identification. Now, AI-infused BI platforms like ScikIQ are coming up with what I call single-click advanced analytics. Single click on a data set and forecast it. So you're looking at a trend line and you want to forecast a single click on that forecast. You're looking at a scatter plot, single click and identify a trend line within that scatter plot and identify outliers and anomalies, right? So basically your business intelligence users, your casual business users are now becoming citizen data scientists, right? So that's a first very important dimension. Everybody can now get much deeper insights than before. But that's only one dimension. The second dimension is broader access, right? So the first one was deeper insights. The second one is broader access. While, yes, 20% are comfortable with point and click, drag and drop, But the theory goes, and we all hope, that every single business user can ask a business question in a natural language, right? So who can't ask a question, why did I sell fewer widgets yesterday than the day before, right? So natural language to query, and then as a response, natural language generation, explaining, not just showing me the results of that SQL generated data set, not just showing me a dashboard and maybe a trend line, but explaining to me what is it that I'm looking at. I'm looking at a trend, and the trend is trending upwards, and that there was a reversal from the day before when it was trending downwards, and the high probability of the key influencer on the trend reversal was an XYZ data point, right? So hopefully conversational user interface, natural language to query and natural language generation is going to help us penetrate that 20% adoption barrier. But that's not the last one. Typically, this is where most of the vendors and most of the consultants, when they talk about AI-infused BI, stop. I take it one step further, and I talk about something that we call knowledge gaps. Because even in the first two scenarios, somebody has got to go into a BI or an analytical application and ask a question. Well, what if I am too busy to go into that application and ask a question? I don't know that I should be doing that, or I am doing something else. Imagine a busy sales executive, who is out visiting clients, who is walking the factory floors or shop floors with those clients, and they just don't have the time or don't even have the instrumentation to access the data, but they should absolutely be alerted to anything that's going on in their data that's of critical interest. So having some kind of a AI-based, machine learning-based algorithm always running in the background, whether I ask for it or not, but it's just always there. I like to call this ambient analytics. It's just there whether I ask for it or not. And when it identifies an area of interest, what's an area of interest? There is a new anomaly, there is a new emerging trend, there is a new key influencer that's affecting your sales pipeline. Wouldn't that busy sales executive like to know? Right, so kind of a gently alerting that business executive that there is something of key interest going on in the data that he or she should be alerted, and that's addressing the knowledge gap. So I am really hopeful that with these three infusions of AI capabilities into our traditional enterprise business intelligence and analytics applications, will hopefully penetrate that 20% barrier, and where once again kind of will get closer and closer to enterprise data democratization.
Awesome. Very, very fascinating, Boris. Thank you for that. And I think the way you have described it, that how we are actually moving from descriptive to predictive to an ambient, and I would say almost on, always available data, and the democratization is quite exciting. I will come back to a couple of these themes as we, go further in the chat. But at this point, I'd like to, give the floor to Gaurav. Gaurav, you obviously have been a data practitioner and platform owner of ScikIQ, and ScikIQ has AI-infused platform features. Can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of what work you've been doing in this area, and really how is this different from most of the other buzz that we have seen in the past, and truly how ScikIQ is sort of handling that?
Yeah. So, Vipul, before answering, how ScikIQ is different or how we are solving it, let's take a step back. So, when we started off with this journey, we looked at enterprises, what kind of problem statement they are struggling with. So, one, definitely there's a scale-up issue. I call it as a scale-up issue because there's variety, volume, velocity. If you talk about the 5 V's of big data, all of those are at play. So there's a scale which is happening. So you cannot use the traditional ways of working, right? Because of the scale. Second, I'll say, and to some extent, that is what Boris also covered, as part of deeper insights or as part of his broader access dimension. which I call it as a information asymmetry, right? So within an enterprise, I know something which Boris doesn't know, or you doesn't know, or you know something which we don't know, right? So we are dependent on a lot of people, and that information is not symmetrical. It is not available. It is not searchable. I'm not able to find that information at my disposal, right? So that's the second dimension. What we saw, like this is where the companies are struggling. And then what I have seen based on my last 25 years of experience in this data industry, companies spend a lot of money building data platform, building solution, but the adoption is very poor. And the reason why the adoption is poor, there is a misalignment between like people, process, technology, or organization structure standpoint. So that misalignment, you can produce something which is a tech, but if your business is not going to adopt that tech, I don't think that's a better ROI or that's a relevant ROI which you're getting out of it, right? So these are the top three problem statement what we looked at, and we thought, okay, how we can solve those problem statement. So when we looked at how we can address those, so A, it's a ease of use. B, uh, how we can make these insight available where people can start trusting it, right? So trust is at most important. Like, let's say if I am a public listed company, I want to report my profitability number to the street. And if I can't trust on my profitability numbers, I am producing something which is a junk, and there are a lot of people, there are a lot of shareholders or stakeholders which are taking decision based on that number, but they can't trust that number, right? So it is of no use, right? So given this kind of a construct, what we thought, okay, how, see, we are now moving towards 2024. So AI is not a choice or an option. So let me make it very clear. So this is something which has to be part of your solutioning deck right now, right? So it is not something, it's a choice, it is not something which is option. So from a psychic, the platform, what we have built from psychic standpoint, when I'm talking about AI infused, so what we have infused, we have tried to bring that alignment angle where you define your org structure, you define your process taxonomy, how all of these things link, and based on your roles or persona, how you can suck, how you can capture the data which is right for you to serve that sort of a use case. While we are doing that, how AI can automate or take some of the jobs which you are doing so that it makes your life easier. So to me, that's the philosophy what we have taken while we built the whole platform or even the screens or the modules within the platform. So we are trying to connect people, process, technology layer at each and every point by leveraging AI in the core, by leveraging automation in the core, and with only single objective fanatically, which is like how I can make jobs easier for the person who's using that particular interface. Sorry, Vipul, you are on mute.
So yeah, so that's actually quite exciting, Gaurav. I mean, you touched on a number of topics. You talked about how Psychic is going to help in the ease of use, insight availability, org alignment, and human augmentation, right? And those things are obviously game changers for any business. In fact, I'm actually quite surprised how we're using the IDB, insight-driven business term, as something that is already, well understood, and every organization is going by that. But you also touched on a couple of interesting points that I think, Boris, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on. Gaurav talked about, discoverability of data and challenges in that, adoption, and indeed maturity. So, Boris, what are you seeing from your very broad perspective across the industry, in fact, across industries? What are some of the challenges from an adoption and maturity perspective?
Excellent question. Again, one of my favorite topics. So let's first define what is it that we mean by insight-driven business. So insight-driven businesses operate differently than just data-driven business. So mentally, I invite everyone to paint a picture of a circle, a full circle going in a clockwise direction. And if we start putting in some steps, step number one, establish metrics and KPIs, populate those metrics and KPIs, build dashboards and reports, and start getting signals. That's what we call data aware or data driven organization, and pretty much everyone, especially at a upper end of a mid-sized enterprise and large enterprises, they already are able to do that, at least at a business function departmental level. When it gets to an enterprise scale, it gets more difficult. But if we start extending those steps into a constant learning and experimentation, and embedding those insights and signals into business applications, so that once again they're ambient, no matter where I live as an office worker. If I live in an ERP application, CRM application, email, calendar, those insights are just there. They're staring me right in the face, and I'm getting them no matter what, and they're basically forcing me to make data-driven or insight-driven decisions, and I take actions on those decisions, and then those actions affect tangible business outcome, and basically I'm completing that circle. The actions are affecting tangible business outcomes, and the very last step, we're constantly learning and improving from that experience, good or bad. That's an insight-driven business. And as I'm sure you could tell from what I just, from the length and comprehensiveness and the challenges of what I just described, that this is not easy. And therefore, only 2% of a broad market, according to our surveys, are in that advanced insight-driven business maturity category. I don't even think they are at that advanced level at a cross-enterprise level. They're probably doing it pretty well for certain business functions, but not at the entire enterprise. About a third are at the intermediate a level of maturity, and majority, and 2/3 are still beginners. So this is difficult, and I couldn't agree more, Gaurav, with you when you said that technology is an important part of this, but it's only 1/5 of the success equation, right? The 5 key, the usual, business school MBA 101, strategy, people, process, data, technology. Strategy, the initiatives, the mandate has to come from the top, from the very top, not just CIOs, but actually the CEOs. And as a matter of fact, we see in more advanced organizations, chief data and chief analytics officers are not reporting to IT, they're reporting to chief operating officers, they're reporting to chief strategy officers. Sometimes they're even reporting directly to CEOs. So the mandate has to come from the very top. On the people front, we use the phrase insights and analytics is a team sport. You cannot afford to have a small number or even a large number of dedicated analysts. Every single business user, every single decision maker has to be empowered with insights at every single keystroke that they take in their workday. On the process side, it's that constant learning and improving. It's the agile way of doing it. It's how do you govern it? How do you find that perfect middle ground between governance, which we all need, right, and agility and data democratization? Because sometimes these are two very opposing forces. On the data side, once you get data into your enterprise data warehouse, data mart with a nice data catalog, nice semantic layer, yes, the insights are accessible, but getting it there in the first place is a challenge, right? Data discovery, Gaurav, as you talked about. So yeah, this is challenging. It's, the challenges do not go away. As a matter of fact, I think technology is the only thing that has changed by advanced by leaps and bounds, but people and process challenges are with us to stay. So yeah, lots of greenfield opportunities for all of us out there still.
So wow, that was I would say quite a lot to unpack. So let me actually pick a couple of threads from there. So first of all, it's amazing that you feel only 2% of the organizations are truly data-driven now, and even those are in somewhat silos. And more than or about two-thirds of them are really just starting their journey. And what's also very fascinating, Boris, that as you mentioned, the five principles from governance to data, people, process, strategy. What is also clear from your comment about the reporting hierarchy of data officers, etc., that it's starting to become very much a culture, sort of priority as well. The agility and the governance would not come if the right culture is not there in the organizations. So I do want to pick later on the tangible benefits a little bit. But Gaurav, in that context, a new question to you. Given the complexity of actually really becoming an insight driven business in really starting to move up the maturity curve there, you are a practitioner and seeing a lot of implementations in the industry. Do you want to talk about what are some of the challenges and even successes that you are seeing as you are doing large scale corporate project rollouts?
Sure. So I'll start with the challenges first. See, uh, I'll say uh, I'll start with the first order challenge. Uh, what I have seen, some majority of the time, the client doesn't even have picked up the dimension across which they want to measure their maturity on, right? See, what Boris mentioned, if you look at a data maturity or if you look at purely from an organization maturity standpoint, right? Uh, so data maturity, am I looking at from a data architecture? Am I looking at from a data governance? Am I looking at from an authoritative data store? I'm looking at from my data stewardship. So, there are a lot of moving parts across which metadata management. So there are a lot of moving parts, right? So it's not a single dimensional problem statement when we are talking about the organizational maturity. So it's a multidimensional. See, some of the standards they have proposed 11 dimensions or 9 dimensions, and you have to pick and choose where the focus is. So from a challenge standpoint, I'll say again, I'll go back to the alignment part, right? So what is your organization objective? If you are a fast growth organization, right? Maybe there are certain things which are important to you because you don't have time to stop because you are on a high speed, you are on steroids, you want to grow fast. So based on your organization strategy, where you are acquiring a lot of other companies, where you are pumping in a lot of money into the market, launching into different territories or expanding your product lines, based on that strategy, you need to pick up the key dimensions which will be more applicable to you compared to another industry, let's say, which is banking, which is maybe at a matured phase, and they are under a regulatory pressure, right? So maybe for them, data governance or satisfying the regulatory ask is something which is most important. And if you are on high growth, maybe the data architecture or getting a real-time data into your state is something which is most important. So again, I'll go back to the alignment part. And this is where I've seen majority of the time the challenges because, it's not one size fit all. So companies need to pick up, what is the strategy, how things need to be aligned. That's one. And second, data is not a technology problem. This is the misconception. This is a myth. So people pick up tools, right? Enterprises, they go pick up tools, they deploy a good 10 to 15 people, cross-functional team. They expect them to collaborate to produce something which business is not going to use. The adoption is low because it's not a tooling or a technology problem. Neither it's a skill problem, right? Data is so enterprises don't need a data platform. Enterprises, they run on processes and processes need data. And that's a fundamental thing what majority of the companies they forget, right? They look at data spend purely from a technology lens. They don't look at a technology spend from a business lens. So that's the point I think what Boris was also trying to make. If you look at the way the modern organizations are moving, they are putting these data rules into businesses or into top exec, so that there is 100% alignment from a business standpoint. So that's the challenges side of it. And you asked how typically what's the framework or how we are helping our customer resolve it. So, and this is something which we have built within the product itself. Our product start with defining your different type of taxonomy, starting with your org taxonomy. This is how my organization structure is. So I am legal entity aligned, I am business unit aligned, or I am department aligned organization. Every organization have a different org structure. Once you have defined the org structure, right, then you have different processes. So whether these are shared services processes or these processes need to be aligned to this. So then there is a second taxonomy, which is a process taxonomy. Again, you can have level 0, level 2, level 1 process taxonomy underneath it. An intersection of this, we define typically data domains. So this is my data domain, which map to your value chain, right? So let's say, I'll give you one simple example. Let's say I'm doing it for cards and payment kind of industry. So I'll break my whole industry into a value chain. So there is a customer journey, there's a transaction journey. From a customer journey, I look at my processes. These are my onboarding processes. These are my know my customer process. This is my onboarding process, So that's transaction. This is my billing settlement. This is my dispute. This is my that. So based on these value chain or these processes, I'll define my data domains, right? And intersection of my process taxonomy and my legal entity taxonomy is where I'll build my catalogs. And I want to measure and govern that particular feature so that I can track maturity for that business function, because I am taking a process view, so adoption will be higher compared to if I only take a tech view. So that's how we are doing it a little differently compared to a regular vendor or OEM in this industry.
Fascinating. I almost forgot my role as a moderator and wanted to jump in with several questions. But on that note, I just want to summarize. I think you kind of pointed to quite a few powerful things there. I think the first thing is we all talk about a maturity model, but I think the key message that I heard is understanding what maturity model, the number of dimensions in a maturity model, and indeed what are your goals of improving in each dimension is something that organizations have to be very deliberate about and have to make sure that they choose a strategy and a maturity model that actually works for them and their business. And I think that in itself, again, as an industry practitioner myself, I did not talk about my introduction, but I have actually played a number of C-level roles in a number of financial industries, BFSI. I've seen that often, right? That taking a cross industry approach may not work, and I think that's what you talk towards the end. That when you start to think about payments, fraud, collection, whatever the processes, tying that maturity model with your capability-based architecture and understanding that data is both an output as an input into your capability value chains is important. Is the second takeaway I took. And then what was also telling Boris, going back to your previous comment about the culture, the alignment, the agility, and the governance, um, I'm actually starting to also see that in many cases, the data folks are reporting into the board, into the chief risk officers that report into the board. Even some organizations are recognizing that data is actually beyond the day-to-day running of the business, and it's a key risk aspect as well. So it is clear that those are the challenges that organizations have to solve. But I want to come back, Boris, to what you touched upon earlier. These are all the why we have to do it, but to what objectives? You mentioned tangible results, tangible benefits. What are some of the tangible benefits that one should expect by solving all these issues at a broad level?
Well, I'll start at a high level. Being a typical analyst, I'll provide some numbers, and then Gaurav, I'll let you address some of specific benefits that I know your clients have achieved. But I typically look at this, Vipul, across three dimensions. It's top line benefit, bottom line benefit, and risk avoidance. So if we start with top line benefits, is AI-infused analytics helping enterprises find new revenue streams, increase revenue, find new customers, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, absolutely. 47% in our recent 2023 survey that went out to almost 3,000 global enterprise data and decision makers. So almost 47% told us, yes, absolutely, they are achieving these top line benefits with AI-based applications, including analytical applications. The second benefit is bottom line or efficiencies. Can I take away costs? Can I automate some of my processes? Can I augment some of the processes with AI so that humans are more efficient and effective? So is my are my costs going down? Is my profitability going up? Right. So bottom line benefits. That's even a higher number, 59%. Right. Not quite 2/3, but getting there. 59% are reporting that benefit. The third one, very important, I unfortunately don't have a number on, risk avoidance. But Vipul and Gaurav, as I'm sure you know, especially in the financial services industry, right? My background, calculating, risk-adjusted return on assets, return on equity, has been a huge challenge, and machine learning and predictive analytics is playing a huge role there. There is an interesting twist there that we'll leave aside for a separate conversation, is explainable AI, right? This is one of the core examples where you can't just take a machine learning output as granted. You have to explain how machine got it. But yeah, the risk avoidance based on AI recommendations is also a huge benefit.
That's awesome. And Gaurav, from your perspective, what do you see some of the other tangible benefits, or elaborate on these?
I think from a theme standpoint, Boris has covered it all, and these are so top line, bottom line, and controlled, or you call it as a risk. So these are the three key theme areas. I think he has already summed it up.
Cool. And I think one of the other things I heard, Gaurav, when you were speaking earlier, and again in the context of the tangible benefits, I'd probably like to elaborate a little bit more or like you to elaborate a little bit more, is you talked about democratization. Boris, you talked about democratization of data in terms of citizen data scientists and improving access and getting more broader with the availability of the insights. But Gaurav, you touched upon a different kind of democratization where over time data has become a technology problem, and the data sources and the data engineering and all of that has gotten centralized and somewhat captive in IT, where business is not able to generate value out of data either the way they would like to or at the speed that they would like to, etc. Could you talk a little bit about how, in that context, ScikIQ provides some tangible benefits in terms of actually allowing businesses to get to value from data faster?
If you and these are some of the points what I made earlier. Like if you look at enterprise problem, so one, I'm just kind of repeating myself. Like one is a scale-up problem. So first thing first, like once you have put your structure in, once you have defined your data domains, once you have defined your taxonomies, right? Now you're getting to do the actual work, which is ingesting the data, right? So this is where everything is producing data right now, right? So we are connected, and with Gen AI, the amount of the data which is getting produced is humongous. Like it is something which is I don't know how to even measure the data. So your traditional tools are not capable of handling that sort of a volume, variety, velocity of the data, right? And this is where, because we are Gen 2, Gen 3, whatever you want to call it as, we are a new Gen Z kind of a data platform. So what we have done differently is try to accommodate these new variety, volume, or type of data. So that's one, which addresses for your scale problem, because ultimately you have to uh, ingest data from not just structured or traditional sources. You are ingesting data from all unstructured or different type of sources also.
Got it.
Second, from a tangible benefit, see, what I have seen from my experience is, you know, even let's take an example of reporting. Reports are there, dashboards are there, right? When a management or somebody, let's take a simple reporting. Dashboarding is a very mature kind of industry now, right? Even when top exec want a cross-functional report, it takes whole enterprise to serve that need, right? So they are trying to stitch together reports from different functions, from different geos, from different departments, and they are trying to integrate those reports. So what I put this in a category of information asymmetry. So information is there. The traditional way of doing it, yes, CEO is getting that report, right? But how he is getting that report? Is it something which is available to his disposal? Is this something which is a tribal knowledge, or is it a common knowledge, right? So only Boris knows how the sales function work, uh, and that's about it. And he is reporting the numbers based on how he want to report, right? I'm just sorry, Boris, I'm picking up on you, but I'm just trying to make a point here, this is how we are operating today, right? So
Right.
to me,
So
information symmetry is another point, what I'll say, which is linked to your search, right? How easy you are able to find that information. This is where I think it is linked to Boris' second dimension, which is broader access, right? Can I use some sort of uh, chatbot, or can I use a native language rather than putting SQL, which is a language more native to machine? Can I use a language which is native to us and get an answer, get an information back at my disposal, rather than waiting for 20 other people to serve me that sort of information? So that's how we are people trying to put together.
yeah, and and I think that's in some ways I was trying to tease it, or was my takeaway is that in terms of tangible benefits, it does look like that platforms like Psychic are helping organizations move away from spending a lot of operational time, resource, and cost in blocking and tackling and moving data, and to moving to a paradigm of configuring what you want to get out of your data based on your organization and your alignment, and becoming focused on spending more effort on insight actionability as opposed to spending a lot of time and resources in the blocking tackling of data. And from my perspective, I thought that's a great tangible benefits, because the data organizations are becoming bulky, expensive, and not being able to keep up with the business demand. And I think that's a lot of tremendous amount of dollars that can be moved from operational spend to action driven spend. So that was great. But I want to come back to something we started with. We have all spoken about Gen AI. That's indeed where we started the webinar. So can you then come back and touch upon Gaurav? Will begin with you, that in all this, what is the role Gen AI is already playing or expected to play? Can you go down that path?
That's a phenomenal, because it's a habit changing technology. It's a behavior changing, right? So what Gen AI has done now, it has redefined, or it is constantly redefining our interaction with the machines, our interaction even with the human beings, right? So, Vipul, this is something I think you and I, we were discussing earlier, it's an Internet of Things, now it's an Internet of Internet. So what Gen AI has, so the drawback is what Gen AI does, it has uh, transformed everything into a bot now. and where human is also acting as a bot. So, so what Gen AI is bringing to the table, or how it is doing a behavioral change, so today you have a bot which is doing a specific job. For example, your Chat GPT, which is a question answering kind of a bot. You can have another bot which is generating something out of that question answer. You have a bot which is doing a summarization. So where things are getting evolved now, like, think of these as agents, which has a specific skill, and they are very good at performing tasks as long as the task aligned to their skill set, right? So, I am a bot which is good at summarization task. I'm another bot which is good at generation task. I'm a bot which is good at Q&A task. I'm a bot which is good at creating data profiling task or governance task, right? Now, on top of it, you need a strong layer of orchestration, and governance will be part of that orchestration layer. So this orchestrator is kind of now breaking those your instructions. You spoke about Gen AI. This is where with Gen AI, what has happened? I want to interact with the machine language native to me, like the way we are interacting with each other right now. Earlier, how we used to pull out information from the machine is like, we used to select star from EMP, which is like, okay, I'm trying to learn something which is native to machine. So that interaction loop is completely reversed now, right? So I am assuming like, machine will understand the instruction what I'm giving. So that's the role of that orchestration layer, which is parsing or deciphering my native instruction into something where it is creating tasks for these specialized bots. And one of the specialized bot can be human also. Maybe Gaurav, if this thing doesn't work, there's a human actor called Gaurav, and he need to do this now, right? So to me, that's the phenomenal change what is happening with Gen AI. Vipul, does that answer your question?
No, absolutely does. And Boris, I'd like to bring you into the conversation again. How do you see Gen AI sort of impacting the IDB world that we are striving for?
Yes. So in the long term, I think this is transformational. But in the short term, what I'm seeing are mostly incremental improvements, right? And I think it's important to distill, Gaurav, what you talked about in some very specific functions within an enterprise analytical application. So first of all, you're absolutely correct. The Q&A way of interacting with data, natural language to query and natural language generation, is something that Gen AI is going to make it easier, but it's going to make it easier for you, or as a vendor, to implement in your BI platform, right? And therefore, your customers are going to be benefiting from the ease of deployment of these applications that Gen AI provides to you, right? So it's very important to understand that it's not something that building that Q&A bot on their own is something that very few enterprises can venture to do for reasons that I know we're going to go into a couple of minutes. So mostly that conversational UX is something that you, as one of many enterprise BI vendors, will be building based on Gen AI, and then your customers will be benefiting from it. The other benefit is out-of-the-box text mining, right? So traditional enterprise analytical apps always concentrated on structured data, and yes, you could write your own Python routines to extract topics and sentiment from unstructured data. One of the most popular use cases is in the customer experience world, when you send out a survey to a customer or to a prospect. One of the questions may be open-ended questions, so there is a kind of a free-form answer, and extracting topics and entities and sentiment from that answer is something that Gen AI can do natively. It can categorize and classify text natively. As we all know, rich data catalog and rich semantic layer is one of the key capabilities that are necessary to a successful insight-driven business deployment. And building a rich semantic layer has always been easier said than done, because, for example, if I want to enable a natural language question like, what was my revenue yesterday? Somebody has to go in and build the ontology and a taxonomy for the word revenue, right? Because the term revenue has, at least 20, 30 different synonyms. So before, the onus was on an enterprise architect to build all those semantics. Today, with a single click, you can just go to a Gen AI LLM and they'll provide all of the synonyms for that particular word. So building enterprise semantic layer will become a little bit easier. When you create calculated metrics, instead of thinking about building your own calculation, again, you can ask something like Chat GPT. Oh, give me a calculation that'll provide gross margin based on blah blah blah, and it'll provide A plus B divided by C type of a calculation. And let's not forget that even though we have pivoted over the last 20 years of focusing enterprise BI and analytical applications on the end users, but IT and data professionals still play a huge role in this. They still have to write code, and that code still has to be debugged and tested. And Gen AI, provides a lot of benefits to automating code writing, automating testing and debugging. So basically, in the end, where I see an immediate benefit is that vendors like ScikIQ can provide a lot more valuable capabilities to enterprise users at a much faster pace. That to me is an immediate huge benefit of Gen AI, specifically for insight-driven business applications.
Got it. And that's fascinating. And Boris, you also touched upon the knowledge gap aspect that you mentioned at the very outset. It's very clear that Gen AI can impute a lot of missing or probable information. And Gaurav, another thing that I've been kind of using is that we're kind of moving from data explosion, which is what we saw, and that's what led to the advent or caused by big data, to almost like an insight explosion right now. So how do you actually enable and accelerate that insight explosion and indeed control it? So far we have talked, about what insight-driven businesses are, what are the challenges that we are seeing in maturity and adoption, and then what are the capabilities that insight-driven businesses need and what Gen AI brings. We are about, I would say, 15 minutes or 12 minutes towards the end. So one, I'd encourage people to send as many questions as you'd like, as we'll shortly move into, addressing those. But now I'd like to, touch on a couple of other things that now we have understood what we have and how to use it. Let's talk about a little bit about any use cases we may not have covered. So spend a quick couple minutes on what are some of the other key use cases of Gen AI-driven insights that you are seeing in the industry, Gaurav?
I'll say there are many. You pick a point on your data lifecycle journey, and at each and every point, you can apply Gen AI, starting from your metadata discovery, right? Earlier, the discovery used to happen manually, then there was an automated discovery, and now then people were writing codes to build the knowledge graph. Boris touched upon taxonomy and ontologies. Some of these things where a lot of time was spent. I'll give you a simple example. Just to create a business glossary, or just to create a data dictionary, even forget about glossary, even if I have to create a data dictionary, it used to become a very tedious job, because I have to write for each and every field what is the definition, right? Some of these tasks can be given to Chat GPT, and instead of me becoming as an author of that data glossary or data dictionary, I'm becoming a reviewer, which saves a lot of time for me. That's one. Second, the whole lineage or looking at different interdependencies. Once you have these taxonomies or ontologies in place, I think machine can do better job because it can uncover some of the patterns, what we are trying to solve today through a rule-based kind of a system. I'll put another use case. Code generation, Boris talked about that. That's anyways there. Governance, right? So, see, to me, the use cases or possibilities are unlimited. It's just like, you put a kind of a data lifecycle starting from your ingestion to curation to your consumption to your control at each and every layer, at every touch point. There is a use case which can be done better through, using AI or AI related technologies.
Awesome, awesome. So again, my key takeaway from that use case discussion is I like it. You say you pick one piece and there's a use case. I think that applies to the enterprise. But to me, it seems like what Psychic has done is taken that capability approach of everything that data is, that the entire data life cycle, and from discovery to actual consumption, you have accelerated the sort of in actual implementation of each of those complex pieces using Gen AI. So that's quite fascinating. But I want to now move the topic, and Boris, move here towards the end. Is we've talked about risk, we've talked about controls, and there's also a question from the audience from Madhukar. Regulatory and compliance issues that organizations should think about when they're thinking about data. And I'm going to elaborate that question and then turn it over to you, Boris, is that what I have taken away is, especially in sectors like BFSI, where explainability is critical, where compliance, being compliant is critical. How do you see, tools like Psychic? Do they fit in as a pre-processing filter for Gen AI, or where do they exist? And indeed, how do you address some of the regulatory challenges? What are some of the regulatory challenges?
That's an excellent question, and it's not just regulatory challenges. When we published something a few weeks ago on what Gen AI means for enterprise business intelligence and analytical apps, the title of the first chapter was "Do not confuse, please, 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 do not confuse something like Chat GPT for your enterprise-grade analytical and data application." Gen AI apps can hallucinate. They are probabilistic. They can make up answers, and that's not what enterprise data and analytics stand for. Right? No matter what you do, no matter how you twist a question, no matter how you come up with an answer, 2 + 2 has to equal to 4. I mean, it has to be, there are obviously lots of use cases for probabilistic, predictions, etc. But in 90% of the cases, enterprise, a question to an enterprise database has to provide a deterministic answer. 2 + 2 = 4. So what does that mean? It means that, I invite our listeners to think of an enterprise-grade analytics platform infused with Gen AI in 3 sections, where Gen AI itself only is the middle section. And I would probably say that's probably no more than 20% of the functionality, right? The other 80% is split 40-40 between pre-processing and post-processing. So everything that Gaurav and I talked about in the last hour in terms of governance and data quality and data discovery and rich semantically, single version of the truth is single version of the truth. Single trusted source of data is not negotiable. That has to be built, right? And that process is not, may become easier in the long term with Gen AI, but today it's still hard manual work. So that's a kind of pre-processing that all enterprise analytical platforms still have to do out of the box. A very important part where we get towards explainability is what we call retrieval augmented generation. So I encourage all of you, if you are not familiar with the term, look it up, learn about it, and then ask vendors as vendors pitch these new Gen AI infused capabilities, ask them, well, how do you do retrieval augmented generation? And what retrieval augmented generation means is that when I ask a simple question, how many widgets did I sell yesterday? You don't just pass that question to a large language model. First, you do internally inside your firewall. You translate that to an SQL. Maybe you'll use LLM to help you translate that natural language to query into an SQL. But then you run that SQL on your internal database. You get a data set back. So now you have your result set, rows and columns. You have the metadata, and based on that result set, you do what's called prompt engineering. You engineer a very rich prompt. So your simple one-sentence question, how many widgets did I sell yesterday, becomes a 1 or 2 page prompt that you do pass to an LLM. And because that prompt is now so specific, so detailed, when the answer comes back, you now have traceability. You now have explainability that a large language model came back with an answer based on all of these details in the prompt. So that's part of the explainability equation. It's also a way to minimize. It doesn't eliminate completely, but it minimizes to the lowest possible point the amount of potential hallucinations that an LLM can provide. So that's pre-processing. Retrieval augmented generation is very important. And then on the back end, on the output, right, it's very interesting. We talk about all of the latest and greatest, but it's still input, process, output, right? So pre-processing, LLM, and then the output and post-processing. So even with all of that preparation that you've gone through, is the answer what you're looking for? So you need a BI platform, analytical platform like ScikIQ to validate the answer. Is that answer providing numbers and recommendations that are in line with what we know about our enterprise data? Is it providing an answer that is ethical, that is not going against all of the rules and regulations, that's not going against our corporate policies? So it's almost like you need to wrap machine learning algorithm with a set of deterministic rules. If then else, if it comes back with that answer, yes, pass it on to the business user. But if then else, no, let's block, as you said, the people. Let's block and tackle it before it provides an answer that can be detrimental. And then obviously that answer, part of post processing is to provide explainability. Yes, this is an answer that a large language model provides, and this is the traceability. This is the data source that it used. This is the metadata that it used. This is some of the documents that it used, et cetera, et cetera. That's how it came up with an answer. So again, as I said a few minutes earlier, LLMs and Gen AI are providing those incremental capabilities. And by the way, when Gaurav, you and I talk about transformative, and then we kind of pivot a little bit and we talk about incremental, there is a whole other area of enterprise applications, such as helping business users generate emails, right? That's where obviously Gen AI can be hugely transformational. But in enterprise data and analytical applications where a single version of the truth is non-negotiable, at this point, because we still need so many pre-processing step, post-processing step, we need to double down on governance and data quality, et cetera. I still think at this point Gen AI is providing incremental benefits. That's how I see it.
No, fascinating. And Boris, the kind of things that you kind of mentioned there, retrieval, augmented generation. There's already a question from Peter on what sources of information do you follow for those? I think we will try and answer that offline. And you mentioned things like prompt engineering. There's a question from Rohit, which is going to be the last question we take, given we are at time. His question is, how do you think with tools like ScikIQ coming in, and I'm going to say with Gen AI, the job descriptions in data industry will evolve? How do you think the new job descriptions are going to read?
I'm not sure job descriptions are going to change. I think skills will need to shift a little bit, not a lot. So I think we'll be able to get a lot out of data with fewer data scientists, right? So empowering citizen data scientists will relieve the pressure. It's not that we're going to need fewer data scientists, that those precious few professional, PhD level data scientists that we have, they're going to be a lot more effective and efficient. They're going to be able to, serve a lot more individuals. So I think citizen data scientists will, kind of address that requirement. But I think the governance roles, the need for higher data quality, the need to understand and provide traceability and lineage and explainability. I mean, that potentially could be almost like a new role within an organization. Maybe it's part of data governance skills and organizations. But so I think whatever number of jobs we can potentially save on the data science side, I think we'll fill them with new data governance roles. So in terms of, some skills and roles will shift, but I think net we're still, again, in the near term, we're going to be in the same place where we are today.
And
Excellent. So it's, go ahead, Gaurav.
Yeah. I completely agree with Boris. I don't think there's a lot of there will be skills like prompt engineering and all. I think the biggest skill, what I'm seeing now, because at some point in near future, you can assume work can be automated. There will be a bot which can take care of some of the work. So breaking a bigger problem into smaller tasks, right? How you can, the understanding or the business analysis skill, which is, I think that there will be a huge demand from that skill standpoint, because how you dissect the problem so that you can decompose that problem, where some specialized bots or technology can solve that problem. I think that's a skill which I am seeing that will grow. As Boris mentioned, from a data science, from a data engineering standpoint, I think it will lead to operational efficiencies there, and some of the work, and that's the whole objective of technology adoption, so that you can move up the value chain. So they will be doing more value-added activity, which is where the real human intelligence is required, rather than doing something which is mundane and boring. So that is something which machine can take care of. So that's how I see things shifting. And Vipul, just conscious of time, I'll quickly answer Peter's question, and maybe Boris, if you can add to that, because I think maybe a few of the folks will have similar request. So I typically, there's a lot of information which is out there. I typically follow Meta or, LangChain is a good resource. You can look up. There is a lot which is published onto Hugging Face. So you can go, that's a good resource if you are looking at something which is more open source type. Your Meta to Google to Microsoft or OpenAI, they are kind of doing a binary work there. So, I think there's already a lot out there onto a public domain, which is available for easy consumption. I'm talking about the sources which are free, open, available in the public domain. And then you have a research organization like Forrester, Gartners of the world, or IDCs, where you can follow. Boris, you want to add anything onto that, or Vipul?
No. You named all of the right sources. Those are the sources that I follow and then research also.
Yeah, my only addition, Gaurav, would be those are great research resources, but do not underestimate the power of the daily newspaper, the talk in the industry-specific forums. So from my perspectives, as even some of the questions were industry-specific, it is a topic that is being addressed almost in every industry forum. I can tell you in financial sector, etc. I can't think of a convention today that is happening that does not almost have a breakout on Gen AI, broadly, or on specific things like retrieval, augmented generation, or hallucination, or explainability. So a lot of the industry information is evolving as we speak. We're talking about the London Summit on this responsible use of AI, and there's a, everybody, at least in our industry, is waiting for guidance to come down from regulators on what to do and what not to do. So I would say just add to that industry-specific forums. We do have about another, I would say, 7 or 8 minutes, so I'll kind of continue. The question that I like to pick up is, how can companies ensure security and privacy of the sensitive data using LLMs for analytics? As you know very well, Boris and Gaurav, I'm going to augment that question a little bit, that everything that we, let's say, ask to the OpenAI, Chat GPT or any of the others, is also going in back to the web, helping these tools evolve, etc. So when it comes to security and privacy of the sensitive data using LLM for analytics, what do companies need to think of?
Maybe I'll start and Boris can step in. See, to me, this question has to be addressed, period, irrespective whether we are talking about LLMs or we are talking about, like, the way we have been operating prior to the launch of Chat GPT, right? Because that's where the whole movement has started. So, so the question is how we ensure the security and privacy. So it's I don't think anything has changed with LLMs. The framework is same. Like, first you need to classify the information, right? So, we were talking about data clean rooms earlier. We were talking about privacy preserving methodologies earlier. So nothing has changed, right? Endpoint protection, throwing your PI information out there into public. So with LLMs, you have to again put the same sort of a guardrails. I don't think, like, the game has changed. It's the same game. It's only now, like, because LLM, first of all, LLM is not synonymous to Chat GPT, or Chat GPT is not synonym to LLM. If you are building something which is in-house and everything from information classification is classified as internal, there is no or minimal risk, or there's a less perceived risk which is attached. Now, if you are putting something which is confidential, or if you are putting something which is secret, even on your email, you have to apply the same security measure what you're expected to put on top of LLM. So to me, it doesn't matter. Security need to be looked up from an information sharing, information standpoint, information classification standpoint, and then whatever guardrails you are putting as an organization from your maturity standpoint, same need to apply within the LLM. So Boris, over to you.
Yeah, I completely agree. Obviously, everything that we've learned about data security, privacy, sensitivity, etc., stands. Nothing has changed. And if you think about the pre-processing LLM and post-processing, the pre and post-processing, this is what Gaurav, you're talking about. That this is where you need to have a data clean room. This is where you need to have data quality and governance and controls, and that still runs inside your physical or virtual firewall. But what about the LLM itself in the middle, right? So there you've got everybody has three options as far as I'm concerned. There may be more I'm not aware of, but I'm aware of three. You build your own LLM and you run it inside your firewall. That's very difficult and costly. Only a few the largest enterprises can afford to do that, but then that basically your own private instance, nobody outside of your enterprise sees it. The second option is what's called transfer learning. You take an existing LLM and you infuse your enterprise data into that LLM. There are also pros and cons to that approach. And once again, you can run that version of an LLM infused with your enterprise data in a private instance. Again, your own hosting, your own training, your own updates, etc. Definitely costly. So where we do see most of the enterprises are going is with that approach of retrieval augmented generation, where you are in control of a prompt, but you are not in control of what the LLM, like a public LLM, like GPT or Google BERT or others provide. So, what's very important there, are two things. Number one is that you do not use a consumer version of that LLM. You use an enterprise version of that LLM, where there is a contract between you and that vendor that your prompts are not visible to anyone. They do not stay there. So that has to be part of your legal contract with the vendor. And number two, you do need to either you or a BI vendor, analytics vendor that you work with, you do definitely need to invest a lot into that prompt engineering, because there is a fine line between, if you pass more of your data to an LLM, the more accurate the result is going to be. But the more data you pass, the more potentially visible that is. So, is it okay to pass metadata to a public LLM? Yeah, probably is. Is it okay to pass a few first rows or a few sample rows of your data where you probably obfuscated some of the private data to an LLM? Yeah, probably okay. Is it okay to pass the entire data set to a public LLM? Yeah, totally not, right? So that RAG, retrieval augmented generation, prompt engineering is critical in how your private data is going to stay private, while at the same time trying to get that full advantage out of a public LLM.
Awesome. And just to summarize that, from Gaurav's perspective, the same common sense business rules of protecting data, PII, still apply. And I think Boris has a critical piece that, you can secure in private instances, you can use enterprise versions as opposed to the public ones, so that will actually, ensure that your data is not visible in the public domain. And indeed, most importantly, I think that prompt engineering, where you can actually put guardrails and rules to say, what are some of the things that I will process and I will not process, right? Mm-hmm. What should I not do? I meaning the large language model should not do. And I always like to say, you mentioned, Boris, structured language, SQL. The model is the model. There's a structure. There's always going to be a structure that you can actually play with to make sure you can build your privacy and security around it. It should not be the other way around. The model actually controls everything. So there's a ton of other questions, especially some industry-specific ones. I'm afraid we are nearing the end of time. Just a couple minutes left. I would turn this back to you, Gaurav, and then Boris for any final thoughts or closing comments from your side.
No, I think I enjoyed a lot. So, passionate about data and the trends which is happening. So definitely, if after the webinar also, if somebody want to understand more, they want to get hold of different resources, reach out to, I'll say, info@scikIQ.com. So, that will be sent onto the link. So, and if there are any further questions which need to be addressed, which are not addressed as part of this one hour or 1 hour, 10-minute sort of a discussion, so please reach out to us. We'll try to address as many questions as we can. And to me, this is very interesting time. So stay tuned and, looking forward to such more wonderful interactions.
Awesome. Yeah, my final recommendation is, unless you've got a unlimited budget, you're one of the hyperscalers and we have huge, almost bottomless pockets, please do not attempt to build your own Gen AI based enterprise analytical app, definitely for the foreseeable future, buy. Do not build, but buy. You can tune, you can enhance, you can customize, but the basics you need to buy from a BI vendor. Because all of the guardrails, all of the semantics, all of the pre and post processing is just going to be really, really challenging. So look for your enterprise BI and analytics provider to infuse those capabilities into platforms before you think about building something on your own.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gaurav. Thank you.
Vipul, just last point, what Boris mentioned, that's a very important point. I thought I'll see people get generally confused on Gen AI. So that's one role, which is building the model, building the actual model. There is a second position within the industry, which is like, using pre-existing model to solve for your business use case. I think what Boris and we are talking about is, unless and until you have deep pockets, you have a lot of resources, maybe try to refrain one and maybe look at it how you can leverage some of the capabilities to solve for your use cases. I think that's the second position within the industry where a lot of companies have built a very solid business model on top of existing LLM models built by other vendors.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's great. And I would love to have the conversation going on. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, but we are at time. So thank you, Boris. Thank you, Gaurav, for the very valuable insights. And indeed, thank you to the entire ScikIQ team working diligently in the background in organizing it. So thank you, everyone. And if you have more questions, please keep posting and we'll try to get them answered.
Thanks,
So
Vipul.
thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
Cheers, bye.